Russia's designated all three groups as terrorist organizations, and people have been arrested within Russia, allegedly plotting sabotage acts like blowing up railway lines, attacking military drafts, recruitment centers. The Russian authorities say these attacks were planned on behalf of, for example, the Freedom of Russia Legion. So they recruit them inside Russia. For example, if someone wants to leave Russia, there's an organization they can get in touch with, which helps them get out and then helps them make it to Ukraine and then supplies them with everything. A lot of them, of course, they were Russian citizens who were living in Ukraine before the start of the invasion, but didn't have Ukrainian passports, hadn't yet got Ukrainian citizenship, and obviously they wanted to fight to defend their adopted homeland, but they couldn't join the Ukrainian army because they're Russian citizens. So Kiev found a way for them to join in the defense of the country without joining the army, without taking up citizenship.
This is Hugo Rifkin here on Times Radio. I'm with you until 1 o'clock. It has just gone 21 minutes past 11. Now to Marc Bennetts, who covers Russia and the former Soviet Union, including Ukraine, for the Times and the Sunday Times. Marc has a piece coming this weekend on a Russian who volunteered to fight on the Ukrainian side with the Freedom of Russia Legion, a unit of Russian citizens operating under Kyiv's command. Marc Bennetts, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us, Marc. Tell me about Danny Apostle Akel, who's in your piece.
He was a 26-year-old Russian citizen who joined up with the Freedom of Russia Legion, which is, as you said, a unit of Russian citizens under the control of Kiev, which has been fighting for Ukraine. He was also an opposition activist and a philosophy student until he was kicked out of university for organizing protests. And when the full-scale invasion started in 2022, he fled Moscow almost immediately because the police were coming for him, as he was an extremist, which is basically in Russia these days anyone who doesn't agree with Putin. And he left the country through the Estonian border and eventually made his way to Ukraine after a very kind of long, convoluted journey, including 4 months in an illegal immigration center in Estonia, and joined up with the Freedom of Russia Legion. And there he took part in armed raids into Russian territory. The Legion and other units made up of Russian citizens have been trying to actually take over territory, border towns, border villages in Western Russia. And it was during one of these raids that he was killed by a sniper.
How 26. How common are stories like Danny's? How many people are there? Is this an extreme thing for even opposition activists in Russia to do, or is it more common than we know?
They haven't revealed unit numbers, but there are three groups. There's the Freedom of Russia Legion, which seems to be made up of kind of moderate centrist, basically Democrats. Then there's the Siberia Battalion, which is made up of Russian citizens from Siberia, as the name suggests. I've met some of them as well. Some of them have made like incredible journeys, for example, from Yakutia, which is 5,000 kilometers, 3,500 miles from Ukraine. They've never been to Ukraine before, and they travel all the way to fight for Ukraine, which is just kind of mind-boggling. And then there's another group called the RDK, which is made up of kind of like Russian nationalists who are against Putin, and they're also fighting as well. So we don't know numbers, but it seems to be, I would say, probably around 1,000, maybe more, actually fighting, risking their lives to fight for Ukraine.
And do we think these groups are actively sort of recruiting in Russia, or are they largely made up of people who have escaped deliberately, left Russia, and then joined them? If you see what I mean.
Well, Russia's designated all three groups as terrorist organizations, and people have been arrested within Russia, allegedly plotting sabotage acts like blowing up railway lines, attacking military drafts, recruitment centers. The Russian authorities say these attacks were planned on behalf of, for example, the Freedom of Russia Legion. So they recruit them inside Russia. For example, if someone wants to leave Russia, there's an organization they can get in touch with, which helps them get out and then helps them make it to Ukraine and then supplies them with everything. A lot of them, of course, they were Russian citizens who were living in Ukraine before the start of the invasion, but didn't have Ukrainian passports, hadn't yet got Ukrainian citizenship, and obviously they wanted to fight to defend their adopted homeland, but they couldn't join the Ukrainian army because they're Russian citizens. So Kiev found a way for them to join in the defense of the country without joining the army, without taking up citizenship. So they're a mixture.
And you stayed in touch with Danny after you met. How had his experience of the war been? I mean, what was he going through? What had he seen?
Well, we met him in February when we went to make a film for the Times about the Freedom of Russia Legion. And he was kind of their poster boy in a way, really, because he was very articulate, like one of the few who kind of escaped Moscow on the day of the invasion. And so when we got there, he and his fellow fighters were still mourning the death in combat, one of their comrades in arms, which he was still quite upset about. And he saw it as he sees the war in Ukraine as, well, obviously a way of for defending Ukraine, but also the kind of existential battle between democratic ideals and the powers of totalitarianism, which is how he put it to me. Then I also asked him about his future for after the war. And he was like, within the Legion, we don't talk about the future. Whenever anyone starts discussing the future, we just look at them and say, yeah, right. So I think he was obviously very aware of the dangers. And then, I stayed in touch with him afterwards, and we discussed the death of Alexei Navalny, the Russian opposition leader, which was fairly, like most Russian opposition people, devastated about. It kind of represented the death of any hope, really, for the struggle against Putin in the foreseeable future.
And how did you hear of Danny's death? How did that news come to you?
Oh, I mean, it was reported, but I mean, actually, from a Russian opposition journalist in Moscow, who sent me a telegram message. But then it started to be reported anyway. And then I spoke to the spokeswoman for the Legion, and she confirmed he'd been killed in Russia's Kursk region, and he's now buried in Kiev. But I mean, the guy's life was I mean, obviously, it was quite. I can't say we were close friends, but I mean, I stayed in touch with him. I met him. He made an impression on me, and so
he was an inspirational figure for people, I'm sure. Like NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said during the meeting of NATO Ministers of Foreign Affairs this week, he said the Ukrainians are not running out of courage, they're running out of ammunition. From speaking to Danny and others like him, did you get a sense of both those things being true, that the resolve is still strong, but the supplies are perhaps beginning to falter?
Well, I mean, there's no question at all that supplies are beginning to falter, that they're running out of ammunition. I was with one group, and they received, I think, about 15 artillery shells, and they fired them all off. And I was like, what are you going to do now? And I don't know. We're getting more shells. We'll fire them. If we don't, which we probably won't, we'll just go home again. So right. I think Russia's out shelling Ukraine now at 7-1. So it's clear to everyone at the front that if they don't get more ammunition, they're going to have to start retreating.
And what was that? I mean, how did they feel about that? Did they feel betrayed about that? Betrayed by the West, let down by the West? Were they fatalistic about it? What was the mood?
Well, I've asked this question to Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, not the Russians fighting, just more the Ukrainians, and they are all kind of. Among rank and file soldiers, no one said that they feel betrayed by the West. They all said that they feel very, very grateful for the support they had. They just wish there was more. But last year I spoke to Alexei Danilov, who was at the time the head of the National Security Council in Ukraine. He was quite bitter. He was they're killing us. His godson had died. One of his nephews had the leg blown off. And he was like, the West just basically turning a blind eye to this. Which seems a little harsh. I don't think the West is exactly turning a blind eye to it. But I mean, obviously he was quite bitter. And he said at the end, does everyone in the West want Ukraine to win? Because it looks to me as if they don't.
Yeah, that's
so, I don't know. I mean, I think if Russia continues to make steady advances, it's quite likely we'll see the rise of more anti-Western sentiments, as in you betrayed us.
Yeah,
which I guess they would have a right to say.
Danny Eckel, when you met him, he had a message for Russian people, a message he wanted them to hear. What can you tell us about that? What was it?
Yeah, I mean, just like I say as well, like the guy's entire life had been shaped by Putin. He was born 2 years before Putin came to power. He's a son of a Russian mother and a Syrian father, and he spent a lot of his childhood in Aleppo before it was unrazed by Russian bombs. I mean, his message for the Russian people was basically this isn't your war. How much longer are you going to die for? And its final words, just switch your brains on and think about it. That's all I ask.
Yeah, so I mean, it's sobering thought. Thank you very much indeed, Marc Bennetts. Great pleasure to speak to you. Lovely to have you on. Thanks indeed.